Howdy all you delicious people, I'm here today to review 3,000 Miles to Graceland. So this is another robbery movie that has a theme of people either being disguised as or to somehow be tied in. Elvis Presley. Uh, so what happens within this film is we have a number of men who go on to a specific night, which I guess in Viva Las Vegas is Elvis night. And so all of them come on to be disguised as Elvis Presley to make their way into this casino to try and rob from it. At some point, we go on to have these men make it back to their hotel to bargain over money, and then when one thing leads to another, the group starts to pull guns on one another, and that leads to a story about characters trying to scramble after this money to go on and try to be the person that gets there first, or is to outsmart one another. So it just kind of becomes this interesting tale first time around, where it's like, okay, like this is an interesting like switch and change of events. And so we go through this film kind of at the edge of our seat. Uh, we have Kevin Costner that goes on and delivers this very brutal villain character. He is to, of course, be very pushy and very much an interesting character who is to kind of throw his weight around throughout this film. And we, of course, have Kurt Russell's character, Michael, who is to, of course, play the reluctant hero because there's no one else who's going to play the other side of that story. So, with that said, currently this movie is available on Amazon Prime, and it'll only be on there for a very limited number of days from this recording. So I'd highly recommend checking out 3,000 Miles to Graceland as soon as you can. There's actually a pretty decent cast in this film, as well as it being just an interesting story playing out to you. So, with that said, I think that kind of quickly explains the movie. I would say that this movie, of course, is to also be I feel like it's a good movie. Especially because it has that whole beginning with the whole robbery, and it has a very goofy intro. I'll mention that, where it has these like CGI'd scorpions for some goofy reason that doesn't make sense to me. But once you get past that, you're just like, okay, like I'm just enjoying the story, even though it has a very goofy and odd like intro. I think we really just had a person who probably wanted some computer credit to their name, as if they were trying to go on and put up a portfolio for this movie. So they had to go on and put this weird goofy intro that didn't make any sense. But so, with that said, I think it's about that time to just go into spoilers. Let's go into spoilers about this one. And so with that said, I think it's about that time to double-fire this bad boy up, because it's spoiler time, it's about the time to spoil this movie. So, in the very beginning of the film, we had the weird, goofy Scorpion versus Scorpion intro, but then that leads to Michael Zane, who is Kurt Russell's character, that is to drive in to this hotel. So, come to find out, Michael is to make fast friends with Sybil and a kid named Jesse, who is stealing these pieces from Michael's tires, and he runs after him. And Sybil is to find out, it's like, oh, this kid does this all the time. Yeah, this kid steals everything all of the time. So, like, this kid just likes to be a kleptomaniac, and he just likes to steal everything. So, going in, we have Sybil, who is to explain how her name is spelled, and then it seems Sybil is to want to go on with Michael to go to this diner joint, which leads, of course, Michael to give this kid $5, and Jesse is to see this this kind of cowboy gun set, and I'm like, this is kind of unusual because this is in a diner. For some goofy reason, I don't know why they have this in a diner location. But I guess when kind of thinking about it, there's certain like odd items in certain restaurants. Like it kind of tries to become kind of more of a gas station than an actual diner in some locales. But anyways, so the kid has $5 and the cowboy set costs 19. So it seems that Sybil and Michael are going to become fast friends here, as Sybil is to go on and say, it's like, well, hey, like, you're not going to win me over so easy. I'm not one of those kinds of gals. And then the next thing we end up seeing her doing is being in bed with Michael, bashing this bedpost with the two of them on this bed in a very almost odd-like position, because it seems like Sybil is like way almost like on like Kurt Russell's like more of his like chest than anything else. But I guess it is what it is. So while that's going on, we have Jesse, who is to steal Michael's wallet and is to get this cowboy set, and then is to hide this wallet in this attic. So we turn around and Michael goes on to meet with his crew that he is going to rob this casino with, and so all of them go on to get into this vehicle, and they're raring to go, and we all of a sudden have Michael, who is to realize that he has lost his wallet, and so Michael goes on to meet with Sybil to say, like, yeah, like, the last time I remember seeing my wallet is paying for the meal at the diner, and so, like, hey, have you seen my wallet? And so all of a sudden we have Jesse, who runs into this room and closes this door, having Sybil immediately know that this kid had stolen this guy's wallet, and Sybil is to mention to Michael that this kid does this all the time. So Sybil goes into this attic and is to pull out Michael's wallet, and he is to mention that, like, well, I had like $460 in there, and so Sybil's like, oh, here's this money, and Michael's like, well, I guess that's good enough. Like, he probably didn't get all of the money, but most of it. So we even have at one point where Sybil is to tell Michael that maybe there's a way for her to make up the difference, kind of like the girl and the pizza boy. When the girl doesn't have enough money for the pizza, all of a sudden we go into Bama. Same thing happens here. So Michael then goes on to make his way to this robbery that him and his other associates are planning. So they, of course, to make it to the Viva Las Vegas, where it seems that is Elvis Day, there is to be a number of Elvis impersonators going on with a number of line girls doing all these dances and so on and so forth. And we, of course, have this pit boss who, like, doesn't understand, like, this whole event, and is to also uh, say that that people have gone fat or people have gone soft. So on a road trip to this casino, we have all the guys, and so we have Gus, who's played by David Arquette here, who is to have this like death match, this weird goofy matchup, because of course we have David Arquette's character who's known for like being in wrestling roles or even being in like WCW and so on and so forth. So David Arquette is playing Gus, and he's kind of getting everybody um, like something to do during this time. So Gus is going on and having a death match between both Elvis and Sinatra, and who would come out alive. So all of a sudden, while Gus is playing it up, and then at some point, Gus is to mention that the king is down. The king is down, ladies and gentlemen. And all of a sudden, Costner is to pull the car over and is to mention to the guys who is the one who said the king is down. And Gus is like, hey man, it's just a joke. And he's like, no, who said it? And Gus is like, well, I did. And Costner, who of course is Murphy in this movie, is to go on and say, like, F Sinatra. It's like, the king would have won. The king would have beaten Sinatra. And they're like, well, of course he would have. Like, of course he would have won. So, really, Murphy is the guy that you have to please here because you don't want to get on his bad side. So, they make it to the casino, or no, they make it to meet with Jack, who is played by Howie Long here, and he is to have this this helicopter and this whole like hangar with all these items. So they're setting up the crime. So they get to the casino, and it's Elvis night. They're walking through the casino, of course, with all these guitar cases. We have them supposedly setting up that these characters are to be certain band members. Like Kurt Russell is to supposedly be the singer of the group at some point in dialogue. So what happens is that Kurt, who of course is Michael here, is to make his way through the casino and go into this elevator, and he is to spot like a number of people using this elevator, and then once they leave, he takes control of it and is to start to try and keep this elevator on a specific floor to have the guys go on and easily obtain this elevator and go all the way up to the roof, so that way they can go into the helicopter and get out of here. So Murphy and Hanson, Gus, and Franklin are to all make their way through this casino, and it seems that Murphy is to bump into an old friend of his who is only to be called like the Roller Elvis. And so this Roller Elvis is to mention, hey, yeah, Murphy, yeah, I know you. And Murphy's like, you don't know me at all. And he's like, no, like we know one another. And so Murphy is to go on to like, get out of here, like get out of my face, and kind of punches him out. So curious to say, it's like, okay, like this guy was to go on and used to have a prior relationship somehow or another. But so like the Roller Elvis ends up going on and speaking with the detectives Dimitri and Quigley afterwards to go on and say that he used to work with these guys, or he used to work with Murphy, and these detectives have something to go on. They have somebody to try to find and try to search here. So, but we'll get to that later. So Murphy goes on with all of the men to make their way into this location where everyone is going on and counting through all of this money. We have to realize that all of this money is to actually be marked bills. So if these guys are to be quickly wanting to spend this money, uh, it'll get traced back to them and will easily have the authorities and everybody going on and finding them. So the whole factor of the matter is Murphy is to want to go on and tell these men, hey, you better not spend this money after we do this whole deal, because instead Murphy wants to go on and launder the money, so that way they can get rid of these marked bills. So we'll get there. So Murphy and the crew blast their way to get all of this money, and so they run off to find that Michael is having some issues with the elevator. As the elevator, the security is looking and spotting that this elevator is kind of stuck, and we of course have security that's immediately thinking that somebody is doing it in there, because it happens all the time. So they naturally assume to just, okay, well, let's manually adjust this elevator ourselves. And so then Michael goes on to readjust the elevator. So it seems that Murphy and the crew are to have to go on and make it back to the ground floor of which that they were already at, while now Michael is also down there with this elevator. So Murphy and all of the guys are to have their guns off to the side, hoping that no one will really notice, which of course they eventually will, as a number of security are all realizing that these guys have guns, as well as the cameraman going on and telling all these people what had happened. So we have Murphy and Gus and Hanson and Franklin all blasting away at a number of people and shooting their way through, and once they all get into the elevator, we have this one random police officer who's, I guess, undercover, who is firing into this elevator, who shoots Franklin, and now we have a rush to figure out how to try to keep Franklin alive here. So once they make it all the way to the top floor, come to find out, it seems that Jack, Howie Long, is taking a long time to make his way to this rooftop. And so that then pushes our characters to be waiting for Jack. Jack then arrives while singing along to this song. And so all the guys end up getting into the helicopter, and so they're trying to go on and revive Franklin, and Franklin is to mention, I'm dying, and then he dies. So, like, he mentions that he's gonna die and he's not gonna make it, and so on and so forth, and then Costner is to try to keep reviving Franklin and keeping him alive, and he dies. So, we then, I guess, have Jack, who is taking care of Franklin's body, and so we have the group all change into other outfits, other clothes, and make their way back to this room where we have Jesse, the little kid, of course, who is to sneak into Michael's place. And so Jesse is in the bathroom, at some points even hiding himself in this shower, while we have Murphy going on and putting shaving cream on his hands to try to clean the blood off of his hands, because of course we had Jesse, who was to try to shave himself moments before. So they go back into the room, all of them, and so they start divvying up the money, and come to find out now Murphy is upset because where is Franklin's cut? Like, we have rules, and like, I don't want to break the rules. Like, where is Murphy, or where is Franklin's cut? Murphy says. And so Hanson's like, well, hey, like, Franklin is now dead. Like, we have a different set of rules. Like, if anything now, let's just kind of, like, let's cut this 4 ways. And Murphy's like, no. Like, Franklin gets his cut. So the more and more we just have this really stretched out moment where both Hanson and Murphy are back and forth about the cut that Franklin should or should not receive, because these guys are possibly thinking that Murphy is not going to give this at all to Franklin's next of kin, that Murphy is just going to pocket the money. So the guys at some point don't really care how the money is cut up besides both Hanson and Murphy, so they just won't let this go. So it finally just gets to the point where Hanson is whipping out his gun at Murphy and pretending to shoot him, and Murphy has this gun with a silencer and pops Hanson in the knee, having him fall back, and then Murphy shoots Hanson to kill him here. So Murphy is now having both Gus and Michael scramble to get towels, so that way they can move the body while he's bleeding to death, or while he's bleeding out, the body is. So they get all kinds of towels and all kinds of blankets, as Michael is to notice in the bathroom the window is open, and Michael starts to look around. So as they're going on to drop off this body, we have Murphy, who turns on all of the other men and starts to shoot them, and then leaves with Michael's car, trying to at some point go on and get the bag of money, which Michael, of course, stored in the attic of this hotel room while they were to take care of Hanson's body. So Michael, it seems, is to have a bulletproof vest on, because I guess this guy comes prepared. So Michael wakes up after being shot to make his way back to this hotel room, where he finds out that the bag of money is now gone. So Michael then naturally assumes that Jesse had taken the money, and so Michael goes in to Sybil and Jesse's room to now demand where the money is. So Sybil is immediately wanting to call the police, and Michael is to grab the big bag of money that's in the attic and show Sybil. It's like, hey, you want to call the police on this? This big, huge mound of money? And so Sybil's like, okay. So she hangs up the phone. But the police come anyways. So when the police arrive, we have the police asking, like, hey, like, who called the police? Sybil did. And so Sybil writes it off as saying that, like, well, I accidentally hit 41 or 911 instead of 411. I was looking for information. My bad. And they're like, oh, okay, all right. So the police notice that there is this massive bag and ask if Sybil needs help putting this in her vehicle. And Sybil's like, yeah, it's a big bag of books. Go on and put it in there. Because Sybil is demanding that Michael take both Jesse and Sybil with him to do whatever he's going to do with this money, and for them to run off with him. And Michael, of course, refused, because Michael technically right now is in danger, and plus also he had spent some time in prison, and when he finally is to get out of prison, we of course have the guys going on and asking him, it's like, well, hey, uh, like, how do you feel? Do you feel free? And he's like, I don't know about that. So we have Michael that's forced to go with Sybil and Jess on this road trip, and so Michael is very paranoid about Sybil and Jesse, and that he might have to sleep with one eye open. But Michael, during this road trip, at some point gets tired because he's been up all night, and so Michael is to stop at this hotel to then try and be able to get some rest, as he is holding his bag next to his next to his chest, or like he's kind of holding the strap of it next to his chest. So as Sybil is wanting to again throw herself at Michael, so Murphy goes on to make his way back to this hotel room and realizes that the bag is now gone. Murphy has to realize now that someone is still alive, and so he makes his way past this gas station to take, of course, Michael's car, because Michael has Sybil's car, because Michael had paid Sybil $100,000 for her vehicle. So Murphy has Michael's car and makes his way to this gas station, where he kills the gas station owner and is to take a number of items like the whole register, a bunch of beef sticks, and a number of other things. And we had this gas station attendant who was to come out of a room where he is being seduced by a girl named Megan, forcibly, I'm sure. So Megan is to find out that this gas station attendant is now dead, and Megan is to threaten Murphy to call the police, and Murphy's like, well, you could try. And it seems that Megan is to change her tune to say, it's like, well, hey, can I go with you, like, wherever you're going? And Murphy's like, get your bubble gum. So this woman has like a huge like bucket full of bubble gum, and so Murphy is to pour gasoline all over this gas station and blow it up. And so now let's cover like the cop side of things. So we have Dimitri and Quigley that are to find out about this bank robber, or this casino robbery, and or to get some video of who these guys are. And so at some point they need to track down where these guys are going to be. So they figure out by, I guess, some witnesses that were by this gas station that Murphy was to be the man who exploded this gas station. And they're like, okay, so we're figuring out where he's going. We're figuring out where he's heading. Excuse me. So we have at some point where Murphy is to get blown by this woman Megan, and there is all of a sudden a moment where there is a number of guys that are to be this biker gang. And so Murphy goes on and talks to one of the men of this biker gang. And we then have, of course, Murphy, who tells Megan to go and get her gum because she is going to be riding off with these bikers who are making their way to Rio. And that's where we leave off with that girl. So we have Michael with Sybil and Jesse, and Sybil is to ask Michael if there is a secret code for the guy who is to launder their money. And because that's where Michael is going to go next. And so Sybil asks Michael about this, and Michael's like, well, yeah, of course there's a code. And he wrote it down on his pocket, or his piece of paper somewhere. So, because of course Sybil has a plan in mind. So, we wait till Michael is in this diner looking at this waitress, and instead of looking at Sybil. And Sybil, of course, ends up getting very jealous, and so she decides to go to this bathroom. And so all of a sudden Michael and Jesse are talking, and so Michael is to mention how that woman's chest is bigger than his mother's, and that obviously his mother is jealous. And so we had Sybil also hug on to Michael and be annoyed by that waitress. So Michael goes on and checks on Sybil, who is adjusting her makeup, and Michael walks back into the diner to find out that this waitress has oddly prepared this birthday cake for Michael. And so Michael is all of a sudden seeing Sybil run out of this place, run out of this location, and he tries chasing after her, jumping onto the car, or jumping into the car, trying to get her to stop. And Sybil ends up pushing Michael out of the car and drives off. So Michael now has no money for this diner, and so I think they end up doing like a running out moment. So Michael and Jess are now together, and so they try to find a vehicle that they can hotwire or steal. And so come to find out, one of the trucks is unlocked, and Jesse ends up finding the keys as Michael was thinking to hotwire the car. So we have Jesse, who tries to start driving the car. Michael is to try to figure out a way to get into the truck because he doesn't want this to happen twice in one day. So Michael jumps into the back of this truck to find there is this little window that he can open up to try to grab at Jess. And then Michael is to tell Jess to unlock the car door, so he does so. So Michael starts driving this car, and so what they figure out to do is, since Murphy is driving around in Michael's car, they figure out that it's like, well, hey, like, if if Murphy's driving Michael's car, why doesn't Michael just call the police to report it stolen and have the police find this car and arrest Murphy? And Michael's like, oh my god, that's like a great idea. So Michael goes on and calls for the police, and come to find out, at the same miraculous time, whoever was to have their truck stolen reported Michael stealing this truck, and so now he is busted and he is to go on to jail. So now Michael is to be in the same exact jail as Murphy is, and come to find out, Murphy is to mention that he had teamed up with Sybil, and this was a whole game plan all along, that Murphy knew Michael would fall for this woman because he knows her, and plus also, considering this guy was in prison, like, he would probably need like the warmth of a woman anyways. And so we're really looking at it. So Michael chucks the bullet that had hit Michael in the chest, and so it seems that Michael is to be the first one out to go on to this court. And we had Michael, who had spent some time with Jesse and forced him to smoke this cigarette, as Jesse had gone on to steal certain hats for both Michael and Jesse to wear. And so Jesse is wanting Michael to be a partner together with him, and Michael's like, no. But so once we get to the courthouse, we have this lawyer that ends up showing up here, Otto Sinclair, or excuse me, Otto Sinclair. So we have Sinclair that is to mention that he is this certain lawyer, and that he's willing to work with Michael, but it seems that Jesse has this paperwork stating that Michael should become partners with him, and they share 50-50 together. And Michael's like, what? He's like, okay, fine, like, whatever we need to do here. So Michael gets out and is supposed to meet with this Sinclair lawyer at another time later on, and Michael's like, I don't think so. So we have Murphy, who is to get his one phone call where he calls Jack to tell him, it's like, hey man, like, we need to go on and try to figure out a way to get me bail as quickly as possible, because if these guys go on and find my fingerprints, like, I'm done for. And so Jack is like, okay. So Jack preps the bail, and so Murphy tries as quickly as possible to make his way, before anyone else does, to get to Jay Peterson, who works in this kind of antique store that has a number of certain, like, refurbished items that of course are to have been an animal at some point. So Jay Peterson, who's playing John Lovitz, or John Lovitz, who's playing Jay Peterson here, is to be the guy who is to be the laundry moneyer, And so Murphy makes his way to see him, and Murphy goes on to ask if Jay really did kill all of these animals that are in his store, and Jay's like, "Oh yeah." So Murphy is to ask Jay that he wants to see this safe to make sure that this guy really does have the money for them to launder. And Jay opens up the safe to show him. So Murphy goes on to cock this bow and arrow back to consistently hit closer and closer to Jay, and then gets the woman that is also in this office involved. And so at some point what happens is that Murphy goes on to kill Jay and this woman to then pretend that he is Jay Peterson. So when someone is to come up to say this quote, which cleanliness is next to godliness, then like, aha, you're the person with the money. So Sybil arrives to this place making the conclusion that Murphy is Jay because she doesn't supposedly know any better, because supposedly there are two conflicting stories about whether or not that Sybil was working with Murphy or not working with Murphy. There's all kinds of conclusions being drawn here. So Sybil is to mention to Murphy, like, hey, what is this Egyptian thing from? And he ends up saying, like, up my butt. And Sybil's like, what? And he's like, it's from Africa. She's like, oh, okay, it looks more Egyptian. He's like, no, it's definitely Africa. So he starts counting the money, and so the next thing we end up seeing is Michael and Jess making their way to this refurbished place, or with all of these antiques and whatever, to find out that Jay and this woman is dead, and Jess is to pull the woman away to see if it's his mother who's dead, and it's not. So they realize now that Murphy is to not only have the money, but is to also have Sybil. So they're like, okay, so we have to track this guy down. So that, of course, leads the conclusion here that Michael can possibly figure out where Murphy is going next, because, of course, Murphy is to need to make his way back to, of course, Jack here. So when we have Michael that goes on and re-obtains his car after his car had gotten repossessed by the police, Michael goes on and sees that Sybil is in this trunk. And so Michael then is to keep Sybil in the trunk and is to make Jesse aware that his mother is alive. So Michael then opens up the trunk to now argue with Sybil, and so at some point it seems that Sybil is to really like Michael and trust him, because Michael is to tell Sybil that she left her son with a stranger, and Sybil's like, no, Michael, I left him with you. Stating that, like, this guy is not just some stranger. Sybil trusts him. Sybil knows he's going to do the right thing. So Michael is to ask Sybil that there is to, of course, be a lot of money here, more than there was before. Sybil's like, well, like, that's what happens. So we, by the end of the movie, have Murphy, who is to start thumbing it through the streets after he's to get out of jail, to find this wombat fan of this goofy sport. And so Murphy is to hitch onto this guy's car and then take him, kill him, and then put on this outfit to make it look like he is this guy. So Murphy all of a sudden gets to this roadblock, and come to find out, Murphy is to pretend like he is this sports guy and start being loud and obnoxious. And so the police officer's like, hey man, like, next time lay off the beer. So this guy drives off. So Murphy makes his way to find where these guys are, and is to make it to Sybil and Jesse, and is to have this whole car chase scene where Murphy is obviously getting the best of Sybil in this whole car chase. He's doing all these goofy ha ha ha, like, yeah, I'm getting to you. So Murphy takes this metal pole and smacks Sybil and steals Jesse, so that way he can go on and get even trade for this kid for the money. So Michael is to figure out where, like I said, Murphy is heading. So we have Murphy going on to meet with Jack. And so Jack is supposed to have set up that there is to be a couple of guys hired to protect them. And it seems that Jack only hires one, who is Hamilton, who's Ice-T. And Murphy ends up asking Jack, it's like, well, hey, like, I thought I told you to hire a couple of guys. And Jack tells Murphy, it's like, well, this guy is a couple of guys. He's that good. So, because this guy is like swinging freaking on a line. He's spinning around, shooting all these guns. He's murdering a number of people, and it looks pretty awesome. So we have Murphy that is to kind of toss this kid a sandwich, and it's like, well, hey, like, growing boys need to eat. And so Murphy is asking Hamilton, it's like, well, hey, you want a jelly sandwich? And we, of course, have Hamilton's like, okay, I'll eat. So we have at some point the exchange going on here. So Murphy is to meet up with Michael to do the exchange of the money for the kid. And so Jack is to go on and take the money while the kid is to start walking to Michael. So come to find out, Michael is to ruse Murphy, and Murphy realizes when he opens up the bag that the bag is to be of all newspapers, and so he's swindled here. So Michael is to tell these guys the cops are on their way, and so it seems that the cops are coming much more quicker than Michael assessed, because they're all lining up into this area for there to be this massive shootout. As Murphy is to go on and shoot Michael in the chest, Murphy falls seemingly to his death, but we find out again, bulletproof vest. So there seems to be all this gunfire, number of people are getting dead on both sides of things, to where Jack is to take the bullet for Murphy, and Murphy's telling Jack that was a stupid thing to do. Hamilton is blasting his way through a number of people, but while he is kind of flying through the air, it seems that the cops take this as a perfect time to start shooting up Hamilton, and he gets killed here. So Murphy is to realize that his card may be up soon. So Murphy is to toss this thing of money to Jess and tells him, hey, that's all of the money, and like I'll cover for you, which I thought was like the coolest part of this whole movie. So the kid runs off, and so Murphy starts firing on all these men, and so Murphy ends up getting painted into a corner where he then is to go into this room where he is to try and take down all these men while this glass breaks, and he is to, of course, get fired upon. We also had the moment where Jack was to ask Murphy if Murphy was to really be the son of Elvis Presley, and Murphy doesn't answer him. And we also had that moment where Hanson was to say that he ended up gluing his sideburns to look like Elvis just for this job, but it seems that Murphy, like this is a way of life for him. Like his sideburns are to, of course, be real, um, because he believes in Elvis so badly, and so on and so forth. So Murphy, of course, ends up getting shot up here, and so Michael, Sybil, and Jesse, we are to assume that Michael was to have made his way to find out what dues he needed to pay off for his boat. And so the guy is to tell him like these big massive amount of things that he needs to pay for, and Michael is just like, well, okay, like I have the good old mighty dollar to pay for all this, which is basically going to be uh, what probably is left of that dirty money that he has lying around. So we have to assume at some point that Michael was to go on and to have gotten that boat with both Sybil and Jesse, because we don't really see like the real like that's what we have to naturally assume is happening by the end of this film. And really that's kind of the way of which that I would like to end this review, and so on and so forth. So with that said, I think that goes on to cover most of this film. I think I'm gonna go on and get out of here. Bye everybody. Bye everybody.